If you have a E which is more than A, that means there is significant MR. So if you have a E less than A, so the thumb rule is the MR is not that significant, or at the most it is more. And the leaflets themselves, you have to have a very close watch on it in terms of how the margins are. So you can see that this is a very fluid margins over there, and not a very good one for in terms of having attachment itself in terms of putting the clip. So you'll have to have a close watch. Nodules will be there, calcific areas will be there. So just keep a close watch on it and look at it from the short axis as well as the other views also. And the length of the PML in transthoracic can be done. It gives you some rough idea, but always you'll have to use the T which has better resolution. And then once you've looked at the quality of the leaflets, then the MBA. So ideally, you need to have more than 4, so that you don't anything less than that you might end up creating a stenosis. That's always a fear. But there are cases, anecdotals, depending on how the heart team they go through the discussion, and it's sometimes even 3.5 or even lower, depending on how the anatomy and the requirement of the patient status also. So. But as a thumb rule, it's always going to be more than 4 that is required. And mean gradient of less than 5, it should be there. So these are numbers, these are standard numbers, and these are well-known numbers. And apart from just not just looking at the mitral valve, we also have to look at the LV-LA size. So too big an LA can have its own problems, and too small an LA also you will not have much freedom moving within a small LA. So the number again is 3.7. That's anything less than that is not ideal. And the LV is again, you don't want a burnt out LV, so 6.57 centimeters LVIDS, I think that would be the maximum you can push. So that would be looking at the LV LA size in that context. And the functions again, LV 20% is where the cutoff is usually recommended, and as far as the RV function is, anything less than 12, 13 TAPSE, so that's again the parameter which is used. So of course there are other parameters also. Less than 12, 13, the TAPSE, again the outcome may not be so good. So these patients will have to screen them carefully, and if they do have it, you'll have to have and weigh the pros and cons to decide upon. Severity of pH, anything more than 70, not a good idea, because they might end up having problems later on. Even though you fix the MR, the pH will cause continuing problems. So we'll have to rethink depending on how severe the pH is and how you're going to look at it. And looking at any mass, vegetations, thrombus, and any other associated abnormalities also has to be factored. Then this is a regular table, so I'm not going to go into this in detail. So this is from the American Society of Acute, and how to look at the grading and for the severity of MR. So this is available quite easily. And then you have the guidelines from the societies, and this is one which I picked up. And again, you can see that the key parameters here, they focus on vena contracta, you have the pulmonary vein, and then you have the E, and then they also, the European Society has some focus on the VTI of the mitral, and divided by the VTI of the LVOT, and then have this number. So here and there are a few parameters depending on which society is there. And then looking at the LA size. Now the mechanism of the MR is, so you have this MR which in terms of transthoracic, you have the myxomatous valve over there, and then the bileaflet prolapse. Have this algorithm of how you want to approach the primary MR, and again the focus here is on the F tier in terms of where the class of recommendation is 2A, and this is for the primary MR, but the focus is always on surgery, so that's the first thing as far as primary MR is concerned. And when it comes to the tier itself, so it's important that they are symptomatic, and then it is severe, and then if tier is going to be offered in these patients, it has to be higher prohibited surgical risk, and then the anatomy is favorable. So these are the key words which are mentioned in the guidelines. Now, when it comes to the secondary MR, so there is more value, and you have more numbers as far as the secondary MRs are concerned. So here you see that here is class 1 here, and so it's moved up, and that is where the real value is to end up giving a lot of relief to these patients in terms of their quality of life. Now, once you have decided on transthoracic what is the MR of the mechanism, and then you have decided what that you want to take this patient further up, you start to look at what is available to you, and you start with the T itself. So the T provides you in terms of value adds a lot of incremental information, especially the 3D itself. So first and foremost is anything which you want to do in terms of 3D, you have to know your knobs. So this is where a lot of people do get a little challenged in terms of how to address the a good image. So you have to spend a little time, and I would say that it's not so difficult these days because the knobology has become a lot better in terms of how the industry is providing it, but definitely you need to know your knobs. And then you have to have these terminologies of lateral elevation. So these are some very basic terminologies which is mandatory, which is must, and you have to know what it means, and you sort of go through the first level and then you keep scaling it up. So that's how you accumulate information, and it's going to be of great help to you. And just again, emphasis on knowing the knobs itself. And just again, the terminologies. So what lateral width is, so that's the blue one. And when we talk about elevation, that is the depth. So you keep either decreasing, increasing, depending on what the structure you want to see. And then you rotate the image to get to a certain point. And the probe itself, you have to understand the movements. So you have a retroflexion and you have an antroflexion. So any of these movements cause a lot of discomfort on a awake patient, and too much of movements also can be, if you're too aggressive, that also can be a problem. So know when to use retroflexion, when to use antroflexion. And then the lateral movements are very rarely used. The smaller wheel is less used. So especially not in the esophagus, but you can try if you want to in the stomach because you have a larger space over there. But the retroflexion, antroflexion is the important key, the key moment also. Now, when it comes to the primary MR, so you have leaflet abnormality, so you have the flail and the prolapses. But when it comes to secondary, you have two types. You have the ventricular type and you have the atrial type here. So where in terms of ventricular MR, you have the LV, which is the culprit. So you have LV which dilates, and then this pulls down the leaflets, and then you have the annulus dilates, and then you have a lot of remodeling, a lot of geometrical changes happen in an adverse way, and that is something which you have to factor in, especially when you are looking to put a clip here. So this is the mechanism for a ventricular MR. When it comes to atrial FMR, so you have a LV which is normal, and here you can see that the leaflets are stretched out, so there is no tenting as such. So that's the key difference. So you have a lot of tenting in the ventricular FMR and almost zero tenting in the atrial FMR. And these are the patients also who will benefit. So they can also be put into any sort of indication where you need to do a care for them. So atrial FMR, the benefits also have been shown in the MLS at least about 17 or 18%. I think they had atrial FMRs and they didn't. Technically a little bit of a challenge because you have less tissue that is available, so how to hold on to it, but it is doable. And again, this is again showing how the atrial FMR works. So you have the annulus which dilates, and you have a leaflet which is almost stretched out in a straight line. And there are some criteria. This again is very sort of standardized now, and you can. This is the main point is to identify which is atrial, which is ventricular, and once you've done it, then the next is all about sacral. So now the mandatory views. So just I'll go through some very basic ones. So when you put the probe inside, as far as the key is concerned, the moment you see LVOT, so what you see is the A1, P1 and the lateral commissure. So as long as you have the LVOT in focus, as long as you have the LVOT which you see, so it's always going to be A1, P1, and that small area towards the lateral side, so that's going to be the lateral commissure. And as you keep pushing the probe down, so then the LVOT disappears. So then now it transitions to A2, P2. And at this point of time, you have to keep in mind that there is an offset. So you have the two AV valves, they are at different points. You have the tricuspid valve, which is more apically displaced, and then you have the mitral, which is upper. So this is the offset. So when you have this offset, it's going to be A2, P2. But moment you push it further down, and you can see that the offset is not there, they are at the same level. So then it becomes A3, P3 here. So these are some fine points when you are looking at it, how to differentiate which is A1, P1, A2, P2, and it's just about pulling the probe up and down, and you get to see the different segments over there. Then the understanding of the most important view. So this is the BICOM view. So it's always when you see images like this, it's great. So, but not all patients are going to be like this. So sometimes you have some very difficult windows, even in TE also. So, what is a good BICOM view is always the question. So, when you have these two segments, P1 and P3, if they are equal in size, length to each other, that means you have a reasonable BICOM view, and ideally you should see both the papillary muscles and the chordae over there. So, that's the classic textbook BICOM view. And then the orientation here. So the BICOM views are anywhere from 45 to 70 degrees, so you will have to move your degrees back and forth to get a good one. And the orientation is anything in BICOM view. So this side is the appendage, so it's always going to be lateral, and this side is going to be medial, that's where the tricuspid valve is, and the other, the right side is. So this is medial and lateral. So anytime you look at this BICOM view, you need to understand that which is lateral and which is medial over there, and these three segments. So these are all very standardized one. And when you use an X-plane, so automatically what happens is you get an orthogonal cut on the other side. So when you get an orthogonal cut, so it's 90 degrees to this view. So what you see on the other side is P2, A2, P2 here. And ideally you should see the aortic valve, and that is a good cut over there in terms of the BICOM X-plane or the biplane. And this long axis view is usually called as the grasping view. And when I interpose the 3D over there, so here is again going to be, if you're new to the anatomy in terms of T and 2D, so there's a little bit of a change here. So in the 2D, so what you see is lateral is on this side, and the medial is on the other side here. But when you look at the 3D, you're looking at en face, and then you have, it's actually true anatomical view what the surgeon looks, surgeon's view is. So the medial moves to this side. So and your, the septum is here, so you come from the right side and you get into the left atrium. So this medial is on the other side. So this is something which you have to be aware of. And anytime you see the aorta, it's going to be anterior. So this tells you that your anterior, the aorta is your landmark in terms of anterior, and the septum is in terms of the medial. And obviously the other sides are going to be lateral and posterior, and then you have the appendage also. So just to show you how the cut happens over here. And again, as far as the 3D is concerned, so make sure that when you do it in a very ideal way, so the box, the 3D box should include the annular points in both the views, and also include the aortic valve also. So this aortic valve is your landmark to understand where the orientation is going to be. And once you have this, and then you put on the mitral valve, the option which is there on the machine. So what happens is you get the aortic valve at the top, and in case if it is rotated, just rotate the image in a clockwise manner and bring the aortic valve at the top. So this is 12 o'clock. And when you have 12 o'clock and this opposite side will be 6 o'clock, that means this is the ideal way of looking at the mitral valve. Now let's look at the mitral valve a little more closely. So first and foremost, you are the interventionalist, you are on this side, and then the patient is lying here, the head is on this side and the feet is on the other side, and the probe is going down, and then either you or the imager is putting the probe inside. So what happens is towards you is going to be medial and the other side is going to be lateral, and the aortic valve is on top, so that's going to be anterior and posterior. So that's the first orientation which you have to understand. Next is the clock itself. So every time you look at the aortic valve, it's always going to be 12 o'clock. The moment it is 12 o'clock, the opposite side will be 6 o'clock. And then the appendage is going to be 9 o'clock, and the opposite on the other side will be 3 o'clock. So this is again very basic, and it's a must know as far as the anatomy is concerned. So this is the second layer of how you look at it. The third layer is you come a little more deeper. So here you look at the segments. So the segmentation has got it, so you don't have to memorize, you just need to know your anatomy. So you know that this is medial. So medial is going to be tricuspid valve on this side, and anything closer to the medial side of the tricuspid valve, you look at this 3. So A3, P3, and appendage is always going to be A1, P1. So that's the way of trying to remember. And rest is all understanding the pathology when it happens. So even when you're looking at the patient, when you have the, you're doing the intervention, you're standing on the right side, and then you're looking down. So this is how the scallops are going to, the leaflet is going. So you have the A1, A2, A3, across the chest like this, and then you have the medial commissure. So remember, the medial commissure is medial and it is more posterior. So that's why it's called posteromedial commissure. And this is at a higher level. So this is anterior and this is lateral. So that's why it's called anterolateral commissure. Now, you have these nice images. They look great, but the value is limited. So, but you get some important anatomical information. So each of these vendors have got their own way of trying to give us some very good images. So not all patients give you great images. So many times the key probe and physics do not allow you to get good images. It's the lie of the heart. If the lie of the heart is more horizontal or more rightward, then it's a problem. So then the probe, the direction of the probe is not in tune with what you would be getting. Now the next most, I would say that this is the second most important one after the bicom view. So how to assess the leaflets. So once you have the bicom view, so let's go to the center image here. So you have the central cursor here. So it is right in the center here. So you put on the X-plane on the bike plane. So immediately on the other side you get this long axis view. So that means you are at the center. So when you cut it, but your viewing is here on this side. So you're going to look at the PML, AML, you're going to measure the PML length here, you're going to look at any nodules, calcification, fibrosis, caudal rupture, anything which you want to see, it's at this level, at this cut. Now you move the cursor a little, let's say you go to the medial side. So that means whatever you see is the cut on the medial side of the leaflets over here. So again you have the PML, AML, and then this is the extreme end of the A2 here. And the P2 also will come out there. So you do a sweep. These are actually cuts, but you have to do a sweep. You have to go back and forth. Same thing happens for the lateral side, so you move it back and forth here. So this is how to look at it. And when I put the 3D over there, so hopefully this gives you some connect. So that means like when the cursor is in the center, so you're actually slicing, you're taking a tomographic slice and you're looking at this piece of the leaflet on the other side here. But when you move it to the lateral side, that means you're only taking a cut of this, and the advantage of 2D is that the resolution is great and you get to see the leaflets in a much better way than what you can see on the 3D. 3D gives you a lot of spatial understanding and the anatomy, but the 2D gives you a lot of information in terms of the resolution of looking at the leaflets and any abnormality. Now, its same method holds good for MR also. So you have the MR. So let us say that you have a jet which is coming here. You cut the, put the cursor here and you cut it here, and you see how big the jet is. So if you see that this jet in the center is quite big, and when you sort of go towards the lateral side, the medial side, it gets to be slightly bigger here. But when you go to the lateral side, it starts to decrease. So you try to understand which way the jet is going and where exactly it is located and how it is spreading. And when you put on the 3D, you get a much better understanding of how the MR looks like. So you see that it's right in the center and spreads a little towards the medial side. So this is how you understand as far as the MR is concerned. So how the MR is located and how many jets, where it is coming from. A lot of information you get from this. And you can also look at the MR from both the sides. So you can look at it from the LV side and the LA side. And then if you have a long, especially secondary MRs, the coaptation will be less. And then you have a long length of the MR, which is side to side. And anything more than 10 millimeters always is going to be a suboptimal result because the annulus is too dilated and the leaflets are too stretched. So looking at the MR, the length of it from the reticular side gives you some idea of what kind of MR, especially secondary MR, how you are going to deal with this. And you can use the MPR also to understand the location of the jet, looking at the vena contracta area. It's a little tougher, but that's how the MPR works, but the value is different in terms of some specific scenarios. And this again is a closer look. So you most machines, the high-end machines, most of the vendors do have this, so you can see it simultaneous from both the sides. You can see the MR coming back into the LA, and then from the ventricular side you can see the MR entering then again, just like TT, you go through the same sequence of trying to understand the severity. So look at the PISA head, just to look at the bigger the PISA head, that means bigger the orifice. So that's what you have to look into. And then if you want to go through the full extent of looking at the PISA, so again capture the MR jet spectral Doppler, and then we go to the effective regurgitant orifice area, etc. All those things. And then the vena contractor, so look at it in different views and make sure that you don't underestimate or overestimate. And the last but the important thing is looking at the pulmonary vein. So you have the pulmonary vein over here. So again, as the severity of the MR increases, the S wave starts to come down, and typically the S wave, the filling always happens during systole, so your S wave is always going to be more in a normal person, and the diastolic filling will be less. But in a case of MR, as it progressively increases, the S will start to become lesser and lesser, becomes more and more blunted. So you can see that this is very significantly blunted. So that means the MR is quite significant here. And at some point, the MR, the flow cannot enter from the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, and it starts to reverse here. So this is the reversal, which is a sign of severe MR. And always for severe MR, it has to be two pulmonary veins, the left upper pulmonary vein and the right upper pulmonary vein, especially when they're eccentric. Do not rely on only one pulmonary vein. So make sure that you do it on both. So understanding the pulmonary vein helps you to a large extent what's happening. And primary MR, you have just examples of how you can localize. You have a P1, P2, P3 segments. So this is again localization. And then, as I told you, so these are the indentations which you get, and then sometimes they are quite deep, and then you call them scallops. And this is where the real value of 3D is, and especially these other, the photo, the translumination images over here. Now, the primary MR, there are some specific measurements. So whenever, as you saw in today's one, so there's a lot of prolapse. So the wider the prolapse segment, that means more difficult it's going to be, and it's going to be more of a challenge. But when you have a flail, so what happens is the amount of tissue that comes into it, so this is from here to here you measure, and this is called as a flail width over here. And when you look at the 2D, the distance between the central leaflet and the opposite leaflet is going to be the flail gap. So the gap is different, width is different. So more the width, that means more tissue is abnormal, and more clips, more suboptimal, more challenges in terms of catching the leaflet. And the more the gap, more difficulty in catching both the leaflets. So ideally, if it is less than 10, the capture is more acceptable. Anything more than that is going to be quite difficult. So have these numbers, and when you are going into the when you're doing the puncture and getting into the swift part of it, be aware of these challenges, and you'll be able to deal with this better. On the other hand, for secondary MR, you have different measurements. You have what is called as the coarctation depth. So as you can see, both the leaflets are being pulled down, and when they get pulled down, so you can see that the depth from the annulus increases. Ideally, you want a depth of around less than 10 millimeters. The more the depth increases, the more the leaflets are going to be apart, and more difficult it is going to be to capture the leaflets. So that's the idea of knowing the depth. And this small piece of tissue which is there, this is known as the coarctation depth. Ideally, you need some tissue to hold on, otherwise the clip really cannot hold on to something. So ideally, you need to have around 2 millimeters or more. And how to measure PML length. So this is the classic way, the ideal way to do it. So always use the biplane or the X-plane wherever you want to cut it. For example, if it is an A2P2 problem here and you want to look at the length in this particular segment, you cut it here and then you look at the opposite image and then you make the measurements here. So that tells you what is the length which you are looking at. So the usual length of 7 millimeters minimum is required. And for T, you have to use the MPR, and again looking at the mitral valve area, so same thing, which is there for the TT also. Now, the septal puncture is where you need to be very, very careful. So understanding the septal anatomy is important. So you have the thick part of it, and you have the thick part on the other side. So it is absolutely forbidden to go into this thick area because it's a potential space here. The moment you go here, you are creating an opening, and that's where the effluent starts. And on this side also. So always this thin area, so that's where it is. And you might want to go up or down, so that's the other part. And again, unfortunately, fortunately, depending on how you encounter encountered it. So patients come with different fossas. So you have very large fossa, great. So it's wonderful that you have a area of puncture. And there's a moderate size fossa, and then there's a very small fossa. And this is where the real problem happens. So you don't have much room in terms of height, and you have a lot of problems over there. So look at the fossa very carefully. And also look at the PFOs. The PFOs is primarily to avoid going into the PFOs, but otherwise there's not much of a problem. But to be aware of it. And obviously you can't use the PFO as an entry, and because it's too anterior. And when it is not suitable, so these are some very basic ones. When you have severe RV dysfunction, and then you have severe LV dysfunction less than 20% LV, and then severe RV dysfunction less than 12, 10 times, say. Even if you put the clip and you fix the MR, patients are still going to be symptomatic, and it's not a problem. So that is why it's you have to relook at it. And I mean, there are cases where they have looked at bridge to transplant and things like that. People have recovered, but generally as a rule, avoid this. Rheumatic heart disease, not it's not recommended because the valve itself is fibrotic, and once you put a clip, it becomes intensely stenotic. So be careful about it. And again, severe TRs also. And I think you will get enough information as far as this very widely sort of used. Any conference, anybody talking about MTR, they will always show this. So you have this green, you can see that the color changes. So the green is good, and then it starts to become a little pale, and then it goes into the red area, and that is where you have to, this red area is where you don't do it, and then the middle one is where you have a heart team discussion and decide whether you go with a certain problems which you're likely to get, and then your outcome may not be good, but you go with that insight. But the green ones are the ones straightforward ones over there. And I think so at this point I will just stop, and we can